our discussion here this morning. My name is Yvonne.
To create a more sustainable and prosperous world for women, girls and gender marginalized people can lead to progress and thrive. For 47 years, the International Center for Research on Women, ICRW, has been at the forefront of advancing rights and opportunities for women and girls through actionable evidence and innovative solutions. With regional hubs in US, Asia, and Africa, ICRW's work spans the globe, yet our commitment remains deeply rooted in the local context and communities we serve. ICRW Africa has operated as an NGO with offices in Kenya and Uganda since 2011 and 2017 respectively. Our strong history of work, spanning over 25 countries across the African continent, is dedicated to realizing our vision of a world where women and girls drive progress and thrive in an equitable, sustainable and prosperous environment. In July this year, ICRW Africa launched its first strategic plan for the region, marking a critical point in our growth as a gender center of excellence. This plan provides for a multidisciplinary home for African gender experts to develop and conduct high-quality research on gender issues, while also serving as a training and mentoring space for the next generation on Africa's gender researchers. Our strategy emphasizes our commitment to empirical evidence and our aim to provide African thought leadership that is timely, context-specific, policy and politically relevant and reflective of African aspirations. In Kenya, as in many parts of the world, gender equality faces significant threats. The resurgence of anti-gender and anti-rights movement requires us to be more unified and strategic than ever. Today's dialogue underscores the importance of collective action. When government, private sector, NGOs, individuals and communities come together, our unified advocacy amplifies our voices, mobilizes diverse resources, and enables holistic approaches to tackle the multifaceted challenges of gender inequality. We know that gender equality intersects with economic, health, and environmental spheres. This dialogue aims to harness our collective expertise to inform inclusive policies and practices. Community engagement is crucial, fostering ownership and challenging the deep-seated norms that perpetuate inequality. Resilience and adaptability are our allies. As we navigate this landscape, our diverse perspective and collaborative problem solving will ensure that the progress we make is not only sustained but advanced. Your presence today is a testament to your commitment to this cause. In closing, I extend my heartfelt thanks to each of you for your partnership, your contributions, and for honoring our invitation for this dialogue. Together we will drive forward the agenda for gender equity in Kenya and beyond. As Helen Keller once said, alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. Thank you very much, and once again, welcome.
On paper and at the podium, the route to gender equality has a map. But on the road to parity for the sexes, the world keeps getting
for that. We want to now have a conversation about what that state of gender equity in the country looks like from different aspects, in various aspects, both economic and private sector, manufacturing, and sexual and reproductive health rights. We're going to have an interesting panel conversation, so allow me to call up my panelists. We've got Flora Mutai, who's the founder and CEO of Melvin Marsh International, and she's the former chair of the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, and also the former chair of the Kenya Women in Manufacturing. Flora, please make your way up here. Let's give a warm round of applause as she does so. And then right after her, we've got Dr. Caroline Podula. She's an OBGYN and sexual reproductive health and rights in Kenya and gender equality advocate. Please give her a warm round of applause. She comes here. And then we have Commissioner Winfred Lichuma. The reason I'm starting with that is because you all know how to do this. She's National Gender Focal Council Climate Change, UN Framework Convention, and she's a legal advisor, the National HIV and AIDS Control Council, and is a former, I believe, inaugural chair of the National Gender Equality Commission. Thank you very much for coming. And also joining her here is Florence Machio. Florence is the Director of Research and Data at the Office of the Women's Rights Advisor in the Executive Office of the President. Now, the reason I wanted them all to be seated here is because the conversation we're going to have is very, very important in this respect. And what I want us to do is I wanted them seated up here and ready and settled, because before we begin this conversation, I'd like us to set the stage for what the global trends and actual realities look like. So these are the women we're going to be having this conversation with. But first, to set the scene and set the stage, please put your hands together for the ICRW Africa Director, Ms. Evelyn Opondo, to set the stage for us.
On paper and at the podium, the route to gender equality has a map. But on the road to parity for the sexes, the world keeps getting lost. Year after year, global leaders recommit to leveling the playing field, promising to increase education and job opportunities, improve maternal health, and lower rates of child marriage. And yet, by just about every measure, women continue to lag on social and development indicators. How have so many decades of promises failed to deliver results? Back in the 1990s, when the United Nations Development Program established benchmarks for global progress, the Millennium Development Goals set out an ambitious blueprint. Included among the goals was MDG 3, which suggested that world leaders had finally recognized the importance of addressing the challenge. But when the impact of MDG 3 was measured in 2015, huge gaps remained. About a third of the developing world had not achieved parity in primary education. Women were still significantly outnumbered in the global workforce. They earned on average 24% less than men, regardless of educational attainment, and women accounted for only about 1 in 4 members of elected parliaments. UN member states' adoption in 2015 of the Sustainable Development Goals was seen as an opportunity to address past failures, Previous gender-related targets were too narrow. They focused on leadership and education, while omitting detailed strategies for addressing sexual violence or even ensuring basic human rights for women and girls. 2 years into the SDGs, those issues are now being discussed. At the annual UN General Assembly, gender equality was recognized as a cross-cutting issue. That means it is key to addressing nearly every other development goal, from ending poverty to ensuring clean water and sanitation. In the future, UN officials say they will push governments to close the gender wage gap, target gender-based crimes, and improve women's access to land and credit. If these initiatives to guarantee what UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres calls women's economic empowerment materialize, they could transform how the world thinks about pursuing gender equality. But much work remains. Reforming legal frameworks that disempower women and countering deep-seated gender-based discrimination will require vigorous planning and adequate resources, especially to gather the data needed to implement programs and track progress. But more important than anything, as we've learned from the shortcomings of the MDGs, faster progress toward gender equality will require a sustained commitment to translating rhetoric into action.
Of women and girls. In a world where gender equity should be our reality, we are still battling for our fundamental rights. Women are made hyper-visible and celebrated as symbols of global agenda, yet their agency, voice, bodies, and labor are kept invisible in the allocation of resources at the global, national, community, and household level. The global trends tell of a story of progress that is slow and is now at risk of stalling. We have just 5 years to the end of the SDGs, but the promises that we made to the women, it is clear that those promises will not be met. In Kenya, on women in leadership, we have seen some progress, but progress is slow, and major challenges still exist. The constitutional two-third gender rule remains unfulfilled. Women are underrepresented in elective and appointive positions. In the private sector, women are underrepresented in corporate boards and also in managerial positions. The 2022 general elections saw female candidates comprise 11% of the candidates that were gazetted by IEBC. 7 out of 22 female candidates were elected as county governors. One sector that we see good progress at the leadership level is the justice sector, where we have the Chief Justice, the Deputy Chief Justice, and the Chief Registrar of the Judiciary as all female. We also have 91 out of 177 judges as women, and 298 out of 542 magistrates as women. And these were the statistics as at March 2024. We also recently celebrated the appointment of the first Attorney General of Kenya, female Attorney General of Kenya. On women economic power, globally, over 340 million women and girls are projected to live in extreme poverty by 2030. The global gender gap in economic participation and opportunity is not expected to close for another 134 years. In Kenya, 80% women engage in smallholder farming, but only 1% of them own land. And they only have access to 10% of available credit and only access to less than 1% of agricultural credit. Yet evidence shows us that economic dependence on partners increases women's vulnerability to gender-based violence and restricts access to healthcare services, including sexual reproductive healthcare services. Now, two significant gains or progress that we've made on women economic power that I just want to highlight. One, currently the government of Kenya is in the process of developing a national care policy. And if this is adopted, Kenya will be the second country in Africa, only after Ivory Coast, to develop a national care policy. This policy is important for us because it addresses some of the unresolved key women economic empowerment issues, such as childcare, unpaid care, and domestic work, and social protection. The second progress I want to highlight is that in 2021, for the very first time, the government of Kenya produced its first time use survey, which was a key milestone in quantifying contribution of women in unpaid care and domestic work. On the technological front, technology offers new avenues for gender equality. Technology enables digital literacy and online entrepreneurship. It gives access to tools for education, markets that can empower women economically. But the reality is that the digital gender divide makes it very difficult for women to access technology and to take full advantage of this opportunity. At the same time, online space has also become a breeding ground for gender disinformation and misinformation and sexist hate speech. All of these factors undermine women's participation. On women's health, women's bodies are a battleground where societal norms and power dynamics clash, particularly in the realm of sexual reproductive health and rights. Economic disparities force women into very difficult choices, which, with inadequate access to healthcare services, which exacerbates their vulnerability. In Kenya, we have celebrated our constitution, particularly the fact that it affirms the right to health, including reproductive health care. We also have some progressive laws, such as the anti-FGM law and the one that prohibits child marriages. But enforcement of these laws remain inconsistent and is undermined by political and societal resistance. We have high rates of teenage pregnancies, increasing HIV infections among adolescents. All of these highlight the fact that these issues are not only about health, they're also about power, control, and societal norms. And while government has put in place certain initiatives, such as the Triple Threat Initiative, which aims to bring the interconnected aspects in addressing these issues, progress remains slow and is often interrupted by the very systems that are meant to protect women. We are also witnessing alarming rates of femicide, which underscores the need for a comprehensive approach that captures not only the health, but the economic, social, and cultural pressures. And on climate change, women in Africa are heavily reliant on climate-sensitive livelihoods, such as agriculture and fishing. And evidence shows that climate shocks are linked to negative maternal and newborn health outcomes, as well as higher rates of gender-based practices, such as early marriages. Now, against all of this, we are witnessing rising backlash on gender equity. Ladies and gentlemen, gender equity is under attack. We are witnessing rising backlash that threatens to reverse the hard gains that we have won. Efforts to pass regressive bills, such as the Family Protection Bill, and efforts to undermine progressive bills, such as the Reproductive Healthcare Bill, all of these undermine gender equality. Gender equality is increasingly framed as a threat to traditional family values and moral codes. This narrative not only misrepresents the goals of gender equality, but it also fosters resistance to change. We are witnessing heightened misinformation and disinformation, which exacerbates societal divisions and slows progress. In conclusion, the journey to gender equity is far from over, with a lot of challenges ahead. Yet the progress that we have made shows that indeed change is possible. We must use the rising backlash as a rallying call to redouble our efforts to push forward with renewed determination. Every action we take, no matter how small, is a contribution to the larger movement towards gender equity. And this is why we are here today, to challenge ourselves, to inspire each other, and to recommit to the hard work that lies ahead. Thank you very much.
Please give her another warm round of applause for setting the stage so well as to where we are with the state of gender equity across all sectors of life. And I think, just to reiterate what you said, Evelyn, is that within the justice sector, it's not just the Chief Justice, the Deputy Chief Justice, and the Chief Registrar of the Judiciary, as well as, like you rightly said, the Attorney General, but also the President of the Law Society of Kenya. So it just rounds it off, I think, from all aspects when you look at it, and that's something to celebrate. And you're right, we are far from where we need to be as we head towards 2030, the goals that we set for ourselves. So what does that look like very specifically? My panel is here and has been listening, Evelyn, to the stage that you have set for this conversation. So I'd like to begin with you, Florence, from the Office of the Women's Rights Advisor at the Office of the President. Perhaps just to understand, maybe you can give us a general overview of the state of women's economic empowerment in the country? Just some general trends.
Thank you, Yvonne. I'm happy to be here. And on this panel, I have friends. There's Flora, there's my doctor, there's Winnie, and in the room there are people I've worked with. There's my former boss, Faiza, my former colleagues. So I feel I'm among friends. Also, let me just say that I'm standing in for State Department of Gender. I wasn't supposed to be on this panel. I was supposed to be seated with you guys. So whatever I said should not be held against me. That's the disclaimer. But just looking at, from the lens of the Women's Rights Advisor's Office is what I'm going to respond to. When the office was established, many people asked why the Women's Rights Advisor's Office, yet there's Ministry of Gender. And when we set to now set up the office, do the strategic direction, and Flora, you were there when we launched the strategic direction, we realized that the government came in with the premise of the bottom-up agenda. And the people who are at the bottom is definitely women when it comes to economic empowerment. So when you say what is the status, it is not as good as it should be. We've done different levels of research at different spaces, including access to credit. We have the Hustler Fund, we have the Women Enterprise Fund, just looking at are women utilizing these funds? And if they're utilizing these funds, is there a difference? Are they moving over from, I was selling Sim now, I'm able to export Sim? Are we there? And so that's the kind of, and because I'm in research and data, those are the kind of information that we use to advise the president on whether what we have put in place is working or not. So what is the status so far? So I can just give you in the last 2 years, what we've seen is that women, yes, some have access to credit, but beyond that, there is no empowerment in terms of utilizing that credit, moving beyond, having business ideas. And I know Flora has done business. I remember when she started Melvin's, there's a lot of challenges for every businesswoman, and especially Mama Mboga. And we also realized that the Africa Guarantee Fund gives our banks money for women. Yet women don't know that that money is there. And so the banks can say we have money, or they can't say we have money, and they'll return, they'll have made their profit. But one of the things we realized in the research that we were doing, there's a lot of money out there, quote unquote, for women, but women are not accessing. So that's one status. And because women are not accessing, they're not able to improve their businesses. So recently we launched the Empower Her project with the Africa Guarantee Fund and some of the Kenyan banks that receive money from Africa Guarantee Fund, so that they go beyond just giving the money. They actually have to go and do almost like allow women to be trained and understand what paying back means. What, if I take this money, what do I need to do to improve my business? And we launched it in Kakamega early this year, and we're doing all the other 46 counties, so that the woman, if I'm using SimSim, there's a woman who pitched about her SimSim business, and she actually got funding. But this is because nobody was telling this woman there's money available. So we can always say, in matters policy, we have put this and this, but if the women don't know, then it doesn't make a difference. So that is why our office then comes in to make that particular difference. What opportunities are there for women? Are women accessing? If not, what is the bottleneck? Who is supposed to do what? And what can we unlock so that this woman accesses? So we are yet to get there. And we know for us to really experience equity as a country, women have to have money in their pockets. I mean, we need money for self-care because we do a lot of unpaid care work. So status-wise, I'll hopefully give you data before we finish, but status-wise, we are not where we should be as a country, so that women can be able to participate fully in the economy. If I'm running for an office in 2027, I need money in my pocket to be able to run for office. And so if I'm not able to access credit, Evelina talked about access to land, property, all that. If that is not happening yet, because it is not, then we still have a lot of work to do. So as a country, we are not where we should be, and a lot still needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And so I note you talk about knowledge, about some of the policies that exist, access, and of course empowerment and training. What does that look like in the sexual reproductive health and rights sector, Dr. Odula? So first of all, why does this even matter? And if it does, what do the numbers or trends tell us really about national progress and well-being?
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm also happy to be here and happy to see my friends.
And I know there's some friends in a certain corner there who may be able to answer these, these issues that you're asking me about. Why does it matter? Why does it matter that every year our numbers of, when we do a census, why would the numbers go up? Why would they stay stagnant? Why would they go down? There's a woman somewhere who's willing to sacrifice some part of her career, her body shape and everything, to give us a child. There's a woman somewhere, there's a family somewhere who have decided, let's have a Kenyan, let's have an African child, let's have an American child, let's have children. For those who decide they don't want to have children, they're adopting children. They're welcoming children into their families. Unfortunately, when these children or these babies come out of us, they're almost always bouncing baby boys and not bouncing girls. So we don't understand what's going on there. Why do the boys come out bouncing?
The girls are not bouncing, eh?
Very, very valuable member. This woman who dies at childbirth, maybe baby will die at the same time. Husband will be left, hopefully, with a small baby, and they may not be able to take care. So it's really very important that we are not losing women through childbirth. Evelyn mentioned education, knowledge, What do we need? Oh, karibu sana.
Okay, no, you can take a seat. Okay, you can join us. I was going to give you a few minutes to just sit and acclimatize. Ladies and gentlemen, she's joining us on the panel. Let's give her a warm round of applause for making the time for us here today. Honorable Millie Odhiambo, who joins us here, and we'll get to that conversation in a moment. We'll give you some few minutes to catch your breath. First, Dr. Odula, you were talking about sexual, reproductive, and health rights and what they are and why they're important.
So in Kenya, we say we have done well. We moved from 488 women who die out of 100,000 babies who are born. We've done well to 344. How well are we doing? Is that a good figure to boast about, to talk about in any forum? How dare we say we've done well? If we say we're down to 1 digit, maybe we lost a mother through this and this, unavoidable deaths, yes. But in very many of our facilities on the ground, women, now in this shift from NHIF to the new one, they're being asked to come with money up front. Yet they actually paid for a voucher service for them to walk in and have their baby normally or by cesarean section and go home happy, go home with a healthy baby, go home with a vaccinated child, go home with, you know, a future. Not say, oh my God, I'm not sure whether I'm going to, you know, pregnancy is having 1 foot in the grave. That is the old African adage. Are we going to continue living backwards, not forwards? This conversation really matters because by the time this woman goes home, she has to put the baby down, go back to the farm, bring for her husband. So does she have land? Does she call her, you know, that she can call her own? Does she have access to water to clean this baby? To put clean food on the table? Does she have the energy? Was she given iron tablets? Was she given all the vitamins, all the care that she needs for her to come out with a healthy baby? This conversation really matters because you're dealing with the woman as a whole. And as we deal with the woman as a whole, we've put her uterus on the Constitution. I don't see any other body part in our Constitution. The uterus is in the Constitution. And it's really making life for women difficult because 49% of women who are pregnant lose their pregnancies through some natural occurrence. And we don't want to say the word. We're calling it the A word. The A word, what is this? It's an abortion. There are some women who say, okay, fine, I want to be ready for my next pregnancy. Is she not allowed that choice? Does she have to consult and make sure she's not, you know, she's going under the table because she has to hide, because the community will stigmatize her?
Yeah, and
honestly,
yeah, and that's a very passionate plea. Before we move to the next one, I just want to understand from you how important that is for the woman who's seeking access to credit, as Florence has told us, for the woman who's seeking access to opportunities on the political front in private sector. So why are her rights so important there? And how does that help her be the woman who will tackle climate change, the woman who will be in the private sector, the woman who will be on that stage in whatever leadership position she finds herself?
We have to have her issues at heart from birth. You know, like I said, bouncing baby boy, but not so bouncy baby girl, you know. Why are parents choosing to bouncy educate this baby boy and not so bouncy educate this baby girl? Why is there a problem right from the family setup? Why do we choose to uplift and give this baby boy agency and sort of ignore this girl? This girl comes home and say, oh, I was molested in school. Oh, not a big deal. We'll discuss, you know, out of court settlement. You stay home, boy, you continue. You know, there's such a disparity in the messaging right from our homes, then back to school, and then letting those who are perpetrators, those who are defiling our children, defiling our girls, we're letting them go scot-free. So our girls grow up with a very, 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 you know, low agency. Hopefully, you know, we finish 12 years of school, get some education, and then you're graduating and you're at work, you're being told, as a doctor, my colleagues can assist me with this. When I got my first job as an intern, they said, oh, just go there, remove some urine, and then, you know, when the results are out, I'm like, why am I removing my urine? We want to make sure you're not pregnant before you start working. So it's a disease to be pregnant when I want to start work. What are you trying to say? You will not take care of me? My brain is not affected by my pregnancy. My husband and I, we decided to have a child. So, but we are saying it's not in conflict.
Yeah.
We want women to have agency, knowledge, confidence. If I decide to have my baby without having a man, in my culture, I cannot build a house. I cannot even put a signature on that land. Because I'm less human.
So what I hear from you, is the word agency. And if it starts to manifest in her health rights, then that could cascade to other areas. Flora, what does agency look like for a woman in private sector? So tell us about the challenges and the opportunities that exist for women in private sector, and what steps must be taken to advance gender equity in your sector?
Good morning. That's a very loaded question. So let me begin by just saying a little bit about the status of gender in the private sector. So this by an African Development Bank Group study. It says 12.7% of women hold board directorships in 307 listed countries in 12 African countries. I mean, that's a small number. 12.7 in any language is a small number. But I'm happy to say that in women on boards, which is actually, you see, when you have more women, I always say when more women lead, more women will lead. So in the board positions in Kenya, actually in 2015, it was 19.8. A study done in 2021, it's now 36% of women are on boards, which is a very big achievement. And the beauty about that, of course, is that obviously more women will lead. However, when we go into, and sorry, 36, in Africa, let's say South Africa is 17, 16, so the continent is about in their 20s, and I think a global figure is something like 18.9. So definitely you can see in Africa, and especially in Kenya, we're doing pretty well. However, when we start going into the companies, they say no company had achieved gender balance in all 4 levels of, directorship, C-suite, and going down. And only 43% of women workforce in the companies ever disclosed their information. Only 12% of companies have female CEOs. This is a little bit of an old study, I must admit, because this was when we were doing our gender policy in KEPSA in 2021. And the good news is we're actually launching one in a couple of weeks, KEPSA and NSC, so something to look out for. Of course, access to finance is definitely a challenge. Supplier diversity, there's definitely a challenge. Women accessing, being able to access those kind of opportunities. Women-owned SMEs make up the majority. Actually, 57% of SMEs tend to be women and micro. And the saddest thing about this is women are not scaling. Of course, because of various factors of land ownership, infrastructure, and of course our social, shall I say, well, we have to basically look after the family and stuff like that. And then women enterprises, yes, they're more likely to be smaller. 2, women are twice as likely to be unemployed than men. Again, in private sector, another very worrying whatever. And in training and mentorship, only 57% of women have access to that. You heard the digital figure as well. It's not going to help. So generally, there is a challenge. But I must say, over the last couple of years, there's been a great awareness. Even through ICW, we did a study of women in manufacturing. It was a very small number, and that has generally grown. So you asked me, what are the opportunities? I believe it's just to, I think awareness is good. We know what we need to do. I think we need to move to implementation. And it's a conversation we've always had, and you cannot implement what you don't actually, research and put down. Have the data and then start challenging those numbers. So when we did our gender policy in KEPSA, we came up with just 7 or 8 principles that we said we need to sort of follow. And the first one, I believe, is one of the most important ones in implementation, is it has to have commitment from the top. The second one is let's have a baseline. and then track it and trace it right through the whole organization. Because if you don't do that, then anybody can be saying what they want. The other one was, basically being intentional about it. I will trace it and share it before we are done. But I think that is where we are going to make a difference. What I'm seeing the banks doing through government, through AGF, actually giving a lot of collateral security for women to be able to borrow, means you're empowering the woman financially. Once you empower her financially and she's able to borrow, even if she doesn't have the assets will come. I think all we need to do is to continue pushing towards a tipping point. And of course, you always know they're early adopters, so there are those women who will be able to come out, maybe not in your culture, but in some of our cultures, the women will move forward. And once you start moving towards tipping point, which is supposed to be something like 33, everybody else, things will follow, and people will start seeing we are not threatened. So I do believe there's a great opportunity to make this happen. And as we continue, I'll look for the 8 points and I will share them.
Right. Yeah, thank you. And, it's interesting what you've talked about, understanding the baseline. So where are we? Because anybody could state anything. And then intentionality, which I think is the point of our session here today, moving from rhetoric to action. And we've made commitments. We have the national care policy coming up. Well, we have all of these things. It's in our laws, it's in our constitution, it's what we're supposed to do. But, what is that barrier? And what does it take to cross that? And maybe that begins at the very level where laws are made. You want to add something before we bring in Millie? Carry on, Flora.
Okay, I've just found out, where I was saying what we need to do. So empower women by promoting entrepreneurship. That's doing a pretty good job, but needs to continue. Committing to supplier diversity programs. The 2/3, women, the 1/3 AGPO, making it simpler, making it easier for women to digest. That would really, really help. Embracing the role of private sector in elimination of GBV. Of course, it affects us because you're not able to produce, to be as effective as you are. And then supporting breastfeeding in the workplace and the whole conversation around the period where women need to go and actually give birth and come back to work. I think we've done pretty well. We have a gender policy. We have the breastfeeding rooms, and we have conversations about it. We've seen Safaricom and EABL now start giving 4 to 6 months, and not only maternal leave, but also paternal leave. So the conversation is definitely getting there. And the 5th one is bridging the gender pay gap. That one, unfortunately, is still there. So even as you're seeing women lead up to CEO, C-suite, and director level, when you look at the pay, it is slightly different. So I think having those conversations, transparency, and for us to encourage them, and for women also, we have a big role to play in it. In just having the confidence to sit down and say, I do know and I am aware Mr. X is earning this for this position. Last year you've promoted me, but you're still, So a lot of confidence building, a lot of just being able to stand your ground. But this will come, like I say, as we move towards tipping point and a lot of awareness. We are getting somewhere. I must say private sector is pretty encouraging right now.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. That's the confidence, but it's also the knowledge, a mindset as well. What's the mindset like in your space? Millie Odhiambo, representing the people of Mbita constituency. Karibu sana, thank you for joining us. I don't know if you've had enough time to catch your breath or if we can...
Yeah.
You're always ready though. Yeah. Talk to us about the state of gender equity in the political sphere. In terms of even legislative, but just speak to us about what this looks like in your space.
Good morning, everyone. My apologies, I've come late, but don't dub me Millie Come Lately. Because while you were stating here, I had somebody playing bad girl. So don't move from bad girl to Millie Come Lately. My apologies. I think I've heard you speaking about a lot of things. So I was even wondering where to begin off from. But before I look at how equity at the political space looks like, perhaps I just say just a little about what equity looks like at Suba North. Mbita is now Suba North. And I like sharing like live cases. And there's the last elections when we were campaigning, as I went into this community, people normally, when you go for whatever meeting, people will always stand up and seek help, because the MP is also the social security system in Kenya. So when after I've already presented whatever I was saying, so the community stands up with their requests. And normally I'll give a token, like when women stand and say, oh, I've been sick, I'm suffering this and all that. So I'll give 3,000 Kenya shillings, sometimes at most 5, because there are too many. So one of those instances, I gave a woman 3,000 shillings. And then the community told me, it was kind of a chorus. They said, no, Mheshimiwa, we need you to talk to her closely. They said she's had this problem for a long time. So she walked up to me and opened her blouse. Yes, in public. And she had a breast oozing with pus. I mean, I was so shocked I didn't even know what to do. And I took back the money and I sent my vehicle. I stopped my campaign the next day, sent the vehicle, took her to a public hospital. What was the challenge? Why she's never been? In Suba North, my constituency, the level of hospital that's there would not be able to deal with that sort of situation, because it looked like it was breast cancer. And the next place was a little far. And she can't afford 500 Kenya shillings. And eventually, I sent her to a very specific public doctor. And when he saw her, he was like, this looks like it's definitely breast cancer, but we can't even do invasive, investigations, because this breast needs to dry fast. So they had to give a medication, which I paid for, which was more than 10,000 Kenya shillings. Then, of course, after that, when I was following up so that she can go back for now the proper treatment, and she's like, no, I've suffered for 5 years. Mheshimiwa has helped me, I'm not going anywhere. And she refused to go. Why am I telling you this? This is not an isolated case. This is the real situation on the ground. So I like sharing this because sometimes when we talk, our drift goes to us. When I talk about sexual and reproductive health, I'm talking about me. Another example I'll give you is, for me, I'll come here and I say, when I was campaigning, people told me they'll not support me because I don't have a child. No big deal, yeah? But I go to the ground, and women come, when I'm talking on the ground, people talk to me in groups, yeah? They say, Mheshimiwa, we are here, we are the fishermen. Sort out our issues as fishermen. Then others will be like, we are here, we are the farmers, we are the what? And then there's a group that says we are the Jondilo. The Jondilo are the ones who swallow. They swallow means they are on ARVs. And they'll be happy to tell, we are here, we are on ARVs, we are here. But there's a group which will not come. They come out after people have gone, they always follow me. There may be 1 or 2 women. They say, Mheshimiwa, we are the ones who are like you. So I say, which ones? The noisy ones. They say, no, the childless one. Because it is so stigmatized that you can't talk about it in public. Maybe because we've destigmatized HIV and AIDS, we can carry our hands as Jondilo, but I cannot carry my hand as a childless one. I'm giving you this to tell you the reproductive issues that at that level, women have absolutely no voice. And then I give the last example, which will speak to the economic situation, that when one of the last 2 campaigns when I was campaigning again, then I reached at a place where there was a little bit of a hill up. So people told me, Mheshimiwa, it would look really bad if you're campaigning down here and up the hill there's a woman who died yesterday. So they said, just go and say pole to the family. So, of course, we couldn't even go up with our motorbike. So we walked up. So after we reach up, I find the woman is still in the house. She's on the floor because she doesn't even, the family, she never had a bed. So she's on the floor with some very thin mattress covered with a net that is given by UNICEF. And why is she still there? Because they don't have the money to transport the body to the morgue. She's dead, yeah, she died. There's no money, so she's been there for a day, and they can't bury her because there's no money for a casket. And I used to tell people, like my constituents would tell me every funeral, I send money. Even before I left, I know already how much I'm sending for today. I know how much I sent yesterday. Even I was away. I came back yesterday. But I send money even when I'm away for funerals. So I used to tell them, why do I have to send only 3,000 Kenya shillings? What difference does it make? And then they told me, Mheshimiwa, in this case like this one, that 3,000, we make a simple casket and we bury her. So that, for some homes, your 3,000 is like heaven. So we are talking, that's the level we are talking, so that even if you are talking about sexual reproductive health or economic, that's actually the life of majority of the women in the rural. Now coming back to representation, let me get us back to Nairobi. Coming back to representation, I think where I was, we were actually in a meeting in the Netherlands with women constitution makers. And when you look at Kenya vis-a-vis other countries, I was saying Kenya, we are almost at a point where you can say we are over-legislating. Yeah, there are few that are still remaining, but we have really done well in terms of legislation as a country. We have not yet done our 1/3 because of the lack of a formula, so that at the national level we don't have the 1/3. But in terms of other issues, we are doing fairly well. We passed many, many laws from the 2010, and part of the reason that I was giving even at that conference is because in Kenya, we put timelines in the constitution. This law must be passed by a given time. And because of that, we really managed to pass many laws. Of course, there are very key ones, like the sexual reproductive health one, which is still pending. And just before, I don't want to share this now yet, I'll share the story later, but just before I left to go for my meeting in Netherlands, I learned, because I'm moving 2 bills, one on sexual and reproductive health, and one on assisted reproductive health care. And one member of parliament has really, really been fighting, male member, of course, as usual. And so I've been really pushing back with him because it's, especially the assisted reproduction. I'm like, what's your problem with a bill that is only helping couples that don't have children? What's your problem with that? But he really pushes back. Lo and behold, I just discovered that there are bigger and more gatekeepers. So I'm not fighting one member. It just, I don't want to share how and where, but just before I left, there were so many things that were put to make sure the bill is supposed to come tomorrow, to stop it even from coming tomorrow. And it's been derailed. And so in terms of the work that we are doing as women legislators, or even male-friendly legislators, there's a lot of pushback on women's gains, and we must be vigilant. I hope I've answered you in a very roundabout manner. Thanks.
You've answered the question very directly. And first, I want to thank you also for bringing reality to this conversation. Because it's nice. We're at the Serena Hotel. We're in Nairobi. We can talk data, we can talk big numbers, but what you've told us is about the people behind the numbers and what the reality really looks like on the ground. I want us to sit with what you've said for just a minute, because we'll come back and talk about what action looks like, for the women of Suba North, the women in Kilifi, the women in Machakos, in Makueni, in whichever part of this country, what that looks like. I don't know about you, but I'm also still just digesting on some of those stories, and it's disheartening what the state looks like. And just like the women in Suba North, women in all parts of the country are disproportionately affected with the effects of climate change. I mean, generally, the so-called global south are more affected by climate change and yet cause the effects the least. Those effects are felt by women, whom we're told are the majority smallholder farmers, are the majority SMEs. Winnie, what's the status of climate change and how is it affecting women, and what does action look like?
Good morning, colleagues, and thank you, Yvonne. Happy to be here. Today we commence the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. And what a day to be having this conversation. Mheshimiwa Millie and I are MV90. You saw something doing round about MV90. Yes, we belong to that great class of MV90 that has stuck together. Thank you, Mheshimiwa, for that contribution. So let me put my notes aside and just speak from my heart. Gender and climate change. Climate change is not gender neutral. That's one. The impacts on climate change do happen, but what we lack is the knowledge, the skills. You walk around the communities and you find harsh climate and crops have failed. And the farmers have no idea what that means. The next minute, you find we have floods and all the crops have been swept away and nobody provides any responses to that. Occasionally, when I'm home in Kakamega, I walk around a Kakamega forest. And what you see at around midday 1, you'll see women carrying firewood from the forest. And those are the lucky ones who do not get arrested. So there's a lot of arrests of women because of getting into the forest to look for firewood. And so we go, we've just concluded the COP. This time I didn't go, but those who are there would tell you we make very, very interesting presentations on gender and climate change. Yet, the basics are never understood, are not discussed. Nobody says anything about women and their role in climate change. So as a country, we adopted the constitution and the climate change aspects are part of the environment aspects in the Kenya Constitution 2010. We then set up a climate change secretariat that has done very well. I was privileged to chair the global negotiations on gender and climate change. And in 2017, we got the first ever gender action plan at the global level when the COP happened in the Bonn. Every country then was supposed to come back and ensure that we have gender responsive climate policies. As a country, of course, we came and we did our national determined contributions. And as usual, when we write policies, we'll get experts, the ones in this room, and they will put nice language in the policies. And you sit back and we keep going to the COP. We have not, as a country, adopted the Gender Action Plan for Kenya, number one. Number two, nobody puts aside resources for financing the gender actions. And I mean, some of the gender actions are very, very simple. And I will give you stories around this. Once I went to Nakuru County on a project that was being funded by a donor, and they were doing results harvesting. So they were going to see what had been done in matters climate change. And so there was a hype about these, the stoves that they had given to the communities. And so I was so eager for day 3 to go to the field. And so we went to the field, and what did I find? The clay work jiko that was already in my village some years back. And somebody wants to say that is technology transfer. And so what? Because you still have to use charcoal, and where do you get charcoal? You have to log, and you have to get... So I sat back and I was like, so what exactly are we doing? We tell our communities that smoke from the 3 cookstones is wrong, but who is giving the alternative? Surely nobody gives the alternative. And even the alternative we give, if you're saying don't use firewood, and you give an alternative of gas, clean cooking, how many of the community members can afford? And so we talk about Africa and adaptation policies, but the adaptation policies must be what the communities can be able to implement. The challenge we have with our funding model is always the bank and then the communities. In my community, maybe less than 1%. Evelyn, you talked about 1% of women owning land. Maybe in my community, there might be 0.00. And you're asking me to go and access credit because the government has put Women Empowerment Fund. The basics of those cannot be met by women. So I go to my community once and I find my woman rep, Mheshimiwa Izia, maybe she can respond to it. And the call to the women was, please make sure you do not take the Women Empowerment Fund. Please make sure that you don't take the Hustler Fund. And the genuine reason is that we had the Dr. Arias organization, what is it called? Kenya Women Finance Trust. What did they do? Women did access the resources to invest in various aspects, including aspects that would have helped them to really have good understanding. But first of all, no knowledge on how to utilize the resources. And the challenge we face as a country is data is not available. So my sister, you are in a position, you are a data person. We are hoping that we can invest more in the data. Because it is easier to say Kenyans are accessing hustler funds. How much of that goes to women, number one, and going to women, real women? Because we have women behind them who are men. I tried when I was in the office as the chair of the Gender Commission to try and find out the ACPO, government procurement. Can we unveil it? Can we know who is behind ACPO? You will be very sad to learn that indeed men are trading with the government, but using the women as the face of the projects. So we seem to be having a lot of resources in this country, but the impact has not been felt. Why? Because we cover up quite a lot, and we are not willing to remain truthful to the aspects. We need to lift the veil and see there are many resources that are coming in. For example, climate change. We have a lot of programs. African Development Bank has given us a lot of programs. But the other day I was walking around Kibera, from Nairobi Girls all the way to back to Ngong Road. And Flora, maybe what we might want to ponder around is selection of businesses. Now everyone has gone into peanut butter. So you walk all the way from Nairobi Girls and you go around and it's peanut butter all round. And the question is it that we don't have the knowledge? Is it that we don't have the varieties? And the borrowing around when you see Winnie Drive, like when anyone here, if you drove in your village with a car, you are a Mheshimiwa. And Mheshimiwas are known for giving money. So when will our people within the communities want to think about, here are floods, can I look for the information? Because I think for me the challenge is, sometimes when you want to give the information, people are expecting to be paid to come and receive the information. So our policies, we write very good policies as a country, very beautiful policies. For example, on sexual reproductive health rights, as I give you back the program, once, I think in 2015, 2016, Professor Lunga is here and I were doing a program on child pregnancies. And we went to a place in Kwale. And while we thought we were very strong advocates of sexual reproductive health and rights, and I generally thought I was a very strong person without emotions, but we got to this community where a woman is supporting young girls who get pregnant through incest, and she rescues them from their homes, and she had a home of about 20 girls. And when the girls started narrating their stories, now just a little bit about gender-based violence, majority of the people who impregnated these girls were fathers, brothers, uncles, cousins. And one particular girl kept narrating how she repeatedly told her father that he cannot have sex with her, but he couldn't stop. Do you know, when I looked at my panel, we all were crying. And including Dr. Makanyengo, who is supposed to have been on the panel with us because she's a psychologist, psychiatrist. We all were crying because the reality. So I want to agree with Millie that if we stopped a minute and got out of this city and just went to the communities to hear their stories, I think we would all come back and say we need a change of policy. Because the policies are there. You say back to school policy after a girl has gotten a baby. You remember the girl in Homa Bay who used to keep her baby in a basin because she wants to go back to school and she has nobody to take care of the baby. So what do you do at your grandmother's place? You take this basin, you sit in this child, and you go to school. You will know what will have happened to the child in the evening when you come back. And the situation is there and bad. So as we talk in this room, let's test the reality.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I think that might be the running theme of our conversation here this morning, reality, and moving away from rhetoric and policy. And maybe the policy is there and just needs to be enforced or implemented. You will, in case there's any questions or comments from you, please spare those. Also, if you want to share any of the good things that are being said here, please do so on social media. If you want to use the Wi-Fi, I believe the Serena Hotel has the Wi-Fi. I think the only thing they will require of you is to enter your email address and you can access that. If you've got any questions, please put up your hand and we'll come to you. for that question or comment. But first, because we've set the stage and given the reality on the ground, which I think is what's most important, I want us to start closing now. And the closing question will be the same for each of you. What does action look like in your space, very specifically? Because the whole theme of this particular conversation was moving from rhetoric to action. Moving from data to action, from policy to action, from legislation to action. But what does action look like with the statistics that Evelyn had painted about where we are ahead of 2030? Clearly, not where we need to be. Florence, maybe I can begin with you. What's the call to action and what does that look like? Maybe you could give us one or two very practical aspects of that.
Same question I asked the president one time. About practical. All right. I think for us where we sit in the Office of the Women's Rights Advisor, it's very important for us to have evidence for the advisories that we make to the president. And the beauty of our office is that then we can ask any ministry to give us the status of a particular policy, because we realized that yes, we have beautiful policies, as we've all said, but the challenge is lack of implementation, even budgets, even just simple questions of, Ministry of Agriculture, you had fertilizer, how many of those were given to women? So that we are getting data to say that while we said this as a government, this is the reality. And so we continue doing that, including, one that we've done to Ministry of Education on the return to school policy. So how many children, how many girls actually came back? Do you know where they are? And where we know we cannot make noise, we ask people like Millie and others in the Senate to ask those questions, because those questions need answers for us to say this is what can be done. But also number two, as people seated in the room, please note that the Office of the Women's Rights Advisor needs the evidence that you see on the ground to be able to advise accordingly. We are not implementers, but we are an advisory arm, but we also do advocacy. And so most of the things we do is we go to the ground, hear the women, and say, this is not working, or this is working, and this is the solution. A good example is the Women Enterprise Fund. When it was digitized, we learned that there are some women groups that already reached the threshold of now getting beyond 1 million. They were at 700,000, and then when it was digitized, they got to 50K. So they were asking, we were at the level of this amount. Now you've digitized, which is very nice, but for us, we can now only access 50K. So for us as an office, I think what we needed to do is keep our foot on the pedal, to keep on checking what is the data saying and advising accordingly, because we can't wait until the end of a shelf life of a policy to say, oh, it didn't work. We have to continuously be on the lookout of what is happening and what is not happening across board. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Evidence-based decision-making, and at every point. I like what you last said about not waiting until the end of a program and then saying, oh, it didn't work. But, the evidence that you continue to gather, even through the implementation, helps you to pivot and see what's not working and how to make that work. Dr. Odula, what does action look like?
Thank you very much. Similar to what Flo is talking about, and everyone here says we have baseline data, policies are in place. Have we monitored what is happening on the ground? Have we done analysis of what has been put in, the amount that has been put in? Have we seen the outputs? Have we seen what is the effect of what we're talking about? We have policy that says, for example, like Winnie Lijuma says, thank you. I think girls who are defiled, these girls did not just wake up and found themselves pregnant. Who's defiling these girls? Why are they going away scot-free? There's a lot of stigma, of course, and we're really encouraging the mothers to, don't settle these things out of court. Let your daughter hold her head up high. She was defiled, yes. Her rapist, her defiler is inside serving time. She made a mistake. Give us contraceptive commodities. These are young girls. Their blood is boiling. I think mine was boiling also at one time, but we must have used some form of protection for us to be where we are, right now. Let's give them education. If you're saying education will lead them to have more sex, lead them to HIV, no. Give them information. Let them see the benefits of delaying their first sexual contact. Use of contraceptions, use of condoms. Tell them, let's be role models to these young women. In Kilifi, Homa Bay, Millie is there. She's done a great job. Then let's continue giving back to our society. We are born female. All of a sudden, I remember, I think I was 13, 14. I saw something red on my underwear and I thought an insect bit me. I was bitten by an insect. How do you explain periods to your children at home, in school? How do they use products? Do they have products to use? We are suffering from period poverty because we can't even say the word. Ikifika hii utapata periods, this is what you're supposed to do, this is how you dispose of these things. We were told somewhere, I think up north, where when girls have periods, they don't go to school because periods must seep into the sand. So on the days they have their periods, they're sitting out in the sand for periods to connect them to Mother Nature. I don't know where that came through, but a certain member of parliament was wondering why girls are not using the mattresses. Just tear off some of your mattress, use it as... Let's talk about these things. Let's educate our girls. Let's give them commodities. I saw recently where the manufacturer, was it Huggies or the other pads for women, they're supposed to be very, very natural, they're supposed to dispose of naturally, is actually causing plastic dumping in many of our third world countries. So as much as we're welcoming donors, we're welcoming all these things to help our girls, are they friendly to the environment? We are drowning in all these plastics contributed by us because we don't know how to dispose of these products. So this conversation has to start from the home, in schools. The policies must leave the shelves. We are beautiful, at that table, beautiful policy writers. Where are those policies? On the shelves. Some have not been disseminated. There's no money even to print papers. Our midwives who are closer to our communities don't know what are those beautiful documents sitting on those shelves. So like I say, let's be practical. Let's go to the ground. Winnie, well done. All of you in this room can make a difference. I'll sort of leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Let's talk about it. And let's bring policy to action. Flora, yeah, just keep the mic because I want to hear your closing thoughts.
All right, I had said I'll tell you our 7-point gender mainstreaming agenda, which we wrote together with the private sector. And the first one is it's part of the organizational strategy. So when you're doing a strategy, we're encouraging all the companies to sort of have that one. The second one is to support women and marginalized groups in the workforce. On your factory floor, do you have segregated toilets, showers, etc.? And this goes all the way to business associations and leadership. The third one is adopting and implementing gender-responsive policies, which is the breastfeeding and stuff like that, equal pay. Sort of, when we document this, we sort of share it with our members and encourage them to really be transparent, prevent gender-based violence and harassment. You can imagine a lot of factories and things, the lower cadre tend to be women, and you'll tend to find, of course, the men taking advantage. So at what level and how quickly is this sorted out? I mean, of course, we all know the sad case in point of Finlay's out and whatever, and it had a huge effect on tea. For those of us who are in the tea business, it really had a big effect. So making sure that gets sorted. Promote gender awareness is another one, and then set clear targets, measure and report. And for this one, what we were telling the CEOs is don't only just make a statement, make a statement and put it perhaps in your HR department. So when you're recruiting, let's say engineers, not to say that, oh, the women didn't apply. Actually make sure that it is written in such a way that at least you'll get an equal chance. And then for the ones who are saying still the women are not applying, we're even encouraging them go down to STEM, go down to schools and start encouraging STEM, STEM promoting, so that you tell them we're looking for engineers as this organization right down at the school level. And of course, the last one is to put budgets towards this, implementing gender responsive budget and resource mobilization. So that's what we've been doing in the private sector, and I think we are getting somewhere. But let me just say, of course, access to finance for me, for entrepreneurship, is going to be one of the biggest game changers. It has been improving, but we definitely need more. Because, if we empower a woman, we empower the family, which means we empower the society. I think we also need to start looking at negotiating differently. I do sit, no offense to, some writers and, people who promote this. And they say, because we are women, we are demanding this. You think about how does it sound? It sounds like we're asking for an entitlement. I think bringing it home, and Flo, allow me to share what you told me over there. She said she's been trying to get this conversation in front of the president for the last 2 years. And finally, he actually made a statement on femicide. And so this is where, we have to keep promoting it, but bring it home to people. Tell them you have a wife, you have a sister. The best one, by the way, is you have a daughter. And then all of a sudden they tend to listen, and they are going to want to do something about it. In closing, and I think, Winnie, you asked me this question about why do we all make peanut butter? We definitely have a problem around innovation. We have a very Me Too mentality. I don't know where this came from, and I think it's around safety. Because if Flora has done this and she has succeeded, if I do this, I'll succeed. But if we encourage people to come out with their own, to be innovative, and I'll also want to blame a lot of these capacity building programs that are being developed. On Friday, I was in Thika talking to some empowerment program for youth. And I'm telling you, from number one, what are those ones of peanut butter? They were all doing either soap, peanut butter, and some hair products, and everybody, and they had trained 2,000 youth, and I'm like, really? These people all come from diverse areas. They all have unique things going on. They have all different experiences. There's so much innovation we can actually promote. So I want to challenge also the bodies that are giving a lot of capacity building. We appreciate it, of course, but I think we do need to help people step out and really become innovative. And let me just stop with what Wangari Maathai says. It's the little things that citizens do that make all the difference. And her little thing was planting trees. But what is ours? How do we move towards this tipping point in our area? When you're sitting somewhere and you're seeing a program being developed, look at it for its innovation. Look at it for its impact. Look at it for what it will do. As opposed to run on the mill, get the funds, run on the mill, train, say I trained 10,000 women. How did you help them? Because we're living in a world of abundance. There's so much of soap and peanut and whatever. Unless we push creativity, we're saying in entrepreneurship, we're going to find a lot of entrepreneurs fail. And we do know the statistics. 50% of them fail within year 1, I think 75 within year 5. So how are we encouraging these people if we're just showing them run on the mill? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a round of applause for that, because I think that's important. Be more innovative, and that's a challenge, I think, even to all of us. Sometimes perhaps we do those programs like ticking the box, right? Yeah, okay, we got money, we got funding, yeah, check, train 2,000 young women, check, we've done this. But then what is the impact of that? Winnie, what's your little thing that you want to leave us with?
Thanks. I think I will leave you with many, not just a little thing. Now, in some 2008, 2009, we spent 3 weeks in Naivasha with a team that put together standards and guidelines on safe termination of pregnancy. And I can see the culprit who was with me writing for us the notes is in the room. Please put up your hand. He's hiding there. So we then developed the guidance and started, he's putting up a hand. Let's put our hands together for the gentleman who was with us. Unfortunately, Professor Karanja Joseph passed on. Recently, we lost Dr. Kagia, who was with us as we developed the standards and guidelines. Yes. Yeah, Professor Nyunya. So we sat there, thought through the Kenya Constitution, gave the country standards and guidelines for the medical practitioners so that we all have uniformity in terms of implementing Article 26 of the Kenyan Constitution on safe termination of pregnancy. I think the guidelines saw the daylight for only, I think, a month or two, and thereafter the Ministry of Health did withdraw them. Evelyn and her team went to court, and the court said, reinstate the guidelines. As we're talking now, the guidelines have never been reinstated. Daktari, so you all have your standards of termination of pregnancy, I believe, and which is so bad for this country. Why can't we respect the courts of laws in terms of policy implementation? Because, I mean, that's a good policy that remains on the shelf just because somebody somewhere does not like it and does not want the implementation to take effect. That's my number one. Let's reinstate the standards and guidelines on safe termination of pregnancy, because the medical practitioners need to be guided. And I believe this is not the first guidelines for the medical practitioners. We need to adopt it. Second bit of it, I think for the judiciary, in terms of convictions on sexual offenses, the law expects them to have the data, bank the database in terms of the convictions. We've made several recommendations. That hasn't happened, and I believe it's a good place for us to begin and speak to the reality. Number three, we continue to bury our heads in the sand. Teenage pregnancy has gone out of hand. We'd rather not talk about it at home, not talk about it in school. Globally, the world has adopted the age-appropriate comprehensive sexuality education. In Zambia, I found that is called, they call it skills, knowledge, advancement, but come down to the same aspects that need to be covered. Why are we waiting? Why are we allowing girls to be mothers at age 12, 13, when we can give them the knowledge? So that for me is another take home. Another take home for me is digitalization and the gender-based violence around it. I think at Equality Now, we already began to do some studies around how do we deal with issues of the digitalization and gender-based violence, an area that we need to talk about. Mheshimiwa Millie, the two-third gender rule. For 6 years, while at the Gender Commission, that is what I slept, dreamed, walked, talked, spoke. It didn't work. Recently, I helped the team that had been put together, the multi-sectorial team, to look at the new process. Unfortunately, there's nothing new. We just keep coming to the old way of implement, the same way we've implemented for the county governments. So now again, I have a contract on my desk from UN Women to do the same thing, advocate for the two-third gender rule. Now it is in Parliament. Maybe we'd want to hear from you what are the new strategies we can put in place to ensure that that goes through. On climate change, the whole issues of chemicals is an area we are not addressing, and especially the women. So when you give them the chemical, they are spraying their vegetables today and eating them the same day. What are the dangers that we are causing? And then finally, to speak to the people who have the ear of His Excellency the President. I'm doing advisory to the government of Mauritius. And one thing that little country has been able to do is to ensure that every ministry has some little resources on gender responsive programming. One thing I hope, and I did speak to Harriet, the advisor, was if she can ask and advise the president to even just say 1% of every ministry's budget goes into gender responsiveness. And then we monitor. They will be great. I mean, if you're going to energy, Ministry of Energy, they're a huge budget, and you're just telling them, give us 1%. And this 1%, we ensure they have a gender policy and they're implementing it. And we know that within the implementation, we have a framework for empowerment of women. How many women can we empower on matters? Energy. You come to health and have the same. So before you guys close shop, I am hoping that you can be able, after the government, we don't know the next government. You know, some of these things are so transitional. So when the next government comes, we do not know if that position will be there. But if you still have 3 years to make a difference, why can't you advise the president to adopt a gender-responsive budgeting for this country? So that anybody who enjoys public resources puts aside some little fraction of resources that would go into gender and empowerment of women. I think if we did that, we would go a long way in saving this country. Thank you.
Thank you. 1% in various ministries would go a long way in empowering women in just about every sector of the economy. Thank you for that, Winnie. Millie, you may want to close this for us now.
Thank you. Let me just start by picking up the words of one of the speakers on Wangari Maathai, that little things that people do is what counts. And for me, action looks like, it's at different levels. But the first one is at a personal level. A lot of times we talk at these levels, but we don't, internalize at a personal level. For instance, we advocate as women's rights organizations about women having leave, maternity leave. We advocate for 6 months. But at a personal level, be very honest, don't carry your hand. How many of you has had their house managers go on 6 months maternity leave paid? Probably not half this room. That's the reality. Yes, that's the reality. We don't. When I first tried that with my house manager, and she came in when she was young, so she's had 4 children while in my household. So it has meant 6 months of paid leave. And you know, when she's on 6 months of paid leave, it means you also hire somebody else. And we will give excuses and say, my salary is not enough, even when you're earning over 100 or 200,000, but your salary is not enough. If you want the government to be able to take action, then it has to start with us. So at that personal level, we must challenge ourselves. I'll give another example. I like challenging myself. That I've been now member of parliament, this is my 4th term, but elected 3 terms. And I've been doing a lot of, influence through CDF, a lot of infrastructure. And it wasn't until very recently that I realized that I talk at a policy level about lactating rooms, and there was none, not one, in my constituency. Then I said, okay, so who did I expect to do this? If me, the one who is advocating, I have none. And the reality is sometimes we don't internalize the things we talk about, the things we have advocated about. Almost all my life I advocate about this. Then I'm given a chance. And what do? None. So because of that, I actually, in my office, we built a new office and I put a lactating room. And it has become a very curious room. The women were very thrilled, but they find it curious from a rural perspective. They're like, so Mheshimiwa, we will be coming here to feed our baby. Because for them, you feed babies anywhere. So they think it's very curious, and they think I'm sometimes a bit weird. Why are you doing such things? But then they are very happy about it. But then after a while, my office called me, of course the men, and told me, you know, we are doing the government is doing the ring road. It's tarmacking the ring road. And the guys who are doing the construction needed somewhere. So they said, Mheshimiwa, the only room available is your lactating room. And then I was caught up with okay, because we have not equipped it, so it's just an empty room. So I said, okay, let me give it. But then the challenge for me is to find a way of now equipping that room so that the next time they don't create another reason. But you understand the dynamics you're talking about. At a personal level, what am I doing before I ask the government? I can only ask the government if I am doing something. What about reforestation? What about information sharing? And one of the things that I do when I go, whether it's in a funeral or whatever, I had a wonderful, wonderful education officer at some point, and she'd work with me, and I gave her an opportunity that every time she'd be working with me, because me, I'd be doing my politicking, she'd be talking about sexual reproductive health care and blah, blah, blah. And then I'll be working with a very specific person who is talking about planting trees. Then when they were transferred, I discovered now I have to do this, and I bore people because then I have to talk for 1 hour. So you have to find innovative ways because God has given you this platform that you can meet people and you can talk. It doesn't have to be a member of parliament. What about you? In your small spaces, even in your Facebook, when you are sharing things, why can't we share these things that we are seeing? Well, even if it's the impact of climate change, which is very real. Even as I was coming here, I was being told, please send money. There's a part of my constituency that's flooding. So Red Cross is taking food there. Please send money for XYZ. I wouldn't say for what. But it's real. When you are going around and I'm seeing serious deforestation in my own areas, do you talk about it when you go to your own homes? Then the other issue for me, what does it look like, is, again, many of us have talked about it, action looks like budgeting. Then the same challenges I'm telling you about. So now, last parliament, I was in the budget committee. Now I'm in the budget committee. And I love it the way I'm listening to my classmate Winnie saying, ask the president to put a little 1% budget. Let me give you the reality, Winnie. A lot of the men, including the president, think a lot of issues on gender and women are nonsensical. That's the reality. So when you start talking about women, gender, they'll tell you, Milly, umeanza na hizi vitu tena. I mean, are you serious? Can we talk about, we are constructing a billion, I don't know what, of a road, you are coming here with the gender. What are you talking about? So how do we find a way of making these issues a reality? And this one, I think one of us, some of us are the ones who have failed you, because we're supposed to bring an amendment in the law, which is similar to what is in Uganda, that every ministry, as now they are going through the budget policy statement, you need to tell us how much, what percentage you have put. And then when you are budgeting, there must be a percentage by law, because we have not provided it by law yet. I think that's what we need to do. And then action looks like sharing information. Action looks like dealing with corruption. Because corruption is what is stifling. This country has an enormous, I sit in budget so I can tell you confidently, this country has a lot of money. Even as we go out to borrow, we have a lot of money. But we have almost 50% budgeted corruption. When the budget comes, I always tell people that I can tell you from this budget, I'll tell you this one is Winnie Lichuma, this is Millie Odhiambo. I'm not cheating you, I'm not exaggerating, it's a reality. We have serious budgeted corruption. And until we get serious political goodwill, and maybe to just give you the example, that KK, for instance, have just come in. And it is not just to KK, it's virtually every government that has come in. KK has just come in. There are people who are telling you, it is our turn to eat. and they are not sure whether they are coming back. Yeah? KK is not sure whether they are coming back. So the moment you come in, the first 2 years, because it's too good to be true, we are here. We were hoping to be, we are here. Too good to be true. Grab and run. So that's what people are doing. They're basically grabbing and running. And sometimes, I even feel sorry for some of the leaders, including the president. Yeah? Why? Because these are people who have supported him. Sometimes he knows that they are put these corrupt deals. Sometimes he knows that they are influencing these corrupt deals. But then, politically, he still needs them for his second term. So what do? You turn a blind eye. So until Kenya, we find a way of calling corruption for what it is. And action looks like electing good leaders. I see Kenyans, now we are here crying, saying, oh, KK is a bad government, You crying that KK is a bad government. Did you queue for 6 hours to elect KK government? So don't stop complaining about KK being a bad government if you are the one who stood for 6 hours. We are challenging you here about data. Did you analyze? Did you ask? Now, not data. Did you assess? If Emilio Odhiambo is a terrible leader, did you assess whether I'm a really terrible leader, or did you just go with the wave? So action looks like you electing a good leader.
Thank you very much for that. And just a reminder that that call to action is also on a very personal level. And I think, look, if you are going to start implementing those policies when you get to national level, or when you are a member of county assembly, it'll be because it's something you believe in, it's something you've done. You're never going to be able to call for that action if it's not something you have done in your own personal space, whether in your household, in your community, in your family, because leaders come from us. They don't come from Mars or some other land. They come from here. They are one of us. And so thank you. And thank you to each of you for sparing your time here with us today and for giving your insights. And I'm hoping that there is, also some reflection on personal call to action for each of you in your spaces of leadership, in your households, and to each of us here as well. And so to wrap up this call to action, Evelyn Apondo, who's the Africa Director for ICRW, to just come and summarize what that call to action looks like. Ladies, if you'll just, first of all, let me just say one thing. It feels very good to be on a panel and to say ladies. And not ladies and, I'm sorry to the gentlemen, but thank you for being here. We value your support. But I'm so used to saying ladies and of the panel, so this was really refreshing to have ladies. Please, can we give them a warm round of applause for being here and for being leaders in their own right and in their own spaces and effecting some of the change that we're talking about here today. Ladies, please indulge me just one moment. Let's have our call to action, and then we will wrap this up with a beautiful photo at the end. Evelyn?
Thank you very much. We have a lot of points under the call to action, but I'll just read just 4 while we've taken note of everything that has been said. On our calls to action, implement gender policies, transform commitment into action by enforcing existing gender-related policies. Number 2, counter pushback on women's rights, stay vigilant, and mobilize against efforts that undermine women's progress. Number 3, address gendered impacts on climate change, integrate gender-sensitive approaches into climate strategies, recognizing an equal effect on women and girls. 4, shift the narrative on women's issues by using inclusive language that fosters collaboration, community ownership, and shared benefits. And address gendered corruption. I think that is really important. We've also heard about who elects good leadership. gender equity starts with each one of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for that summary. In closing, we can have Meta to just come and close this for us. Meta Kinoti, who is the board chair of ICRW. Karibu sana.
Gosh, what a rich discussion, right? So many things to take home and a lot of things that needs to be further done, and we all have responsibilities. But a real rich discussion that I appreciate. Evelyn already got the call to action, and I hope this has been recorded because there are so many more details actually into this rich discussion that has taken place. And I'm not going to summarize beyond what Evelyn already said, but it's really fantastic. There has been a lot of mention about data and creating evidence, and this is certainly where ICRW is coming in, and we must do our part and also monitor all the fantastic policies that we already have. I agree, Kenya is very good in developing fantastic policies. The challenge is really to make sure that they are implemented and then adjust them when we find out they are not implemented. So a lot of work to do in all spheres that has been mentioned here. And also allow us to talk about the things that we normally are not allowed to talk about that's forgotten. Teenage pregnancy was just one of them. It's like being the order of the day, and it's shameful as a nation that we allow that. Anyway, that was not why I'm standing here right now to start reflecting on what was going on. It's really to just say thank you, and I want to start with saying thanks to the panelists for such a rich discussion, really, and a lot to take home for all of us, wherever we are sitting, in whichever organization, whichever sector, and as individuals, as we also have responsibility. So thank you very much to the panelists, and thanks Yvonne for, as usual, very great moderating of the session. So thanks to you. I also want to thank all of you who are here. Just mention some of the group. I mean, I know why we have development partners here supporting ICRW in our work. I do know that British High Commission is here, CIF is here, IDRC. There might be others that I'm not aware of, but really thank you very much for being here, but also for supporting what ICRW is doing. We have an important role to play in creating that data, that evidence, and continue raising issues. Also thanks to Government of Kenya partners that's here. We have the Office of the President, we have the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, we have the National Gender and Equity Center, and there might be other around, but these are the ones that we have noted. Other partners are here, academias are here, the private sector is here, KEPSA is here, the civil society sector, and of course also not to forget the media, Citizen National Media Group, KTN. So really thanks for all you partners and individuals that are here, for making time to be with us and being part of this important event. When we in ICRW decided that we should have this event, or telling you that we had a new strategy, but we knew that might not really make it to get you come to this event, so we decided to have a panel as well, and we have had a full house. That's fantastic. I also want to thank the staff and the management of ICRW in Kenya, and we have Uganda here as well, really for making this event. This is not a small task, but I, as the chair of the board, really appreciate what the management and the staff are doing in ICRW Africa and building up ICRW in Africa, and now having all of you here today. So I think that's all the one I want to thank. So just again, thanks to all of you. It has been a fantastic morning. We all have a responsibility to fight for gender equity and continue fighting, continue being the good advocates that never be tired. So thank you very much. And back to you, Yvonne, I believe.
Thank you, Meta. I'd like to ask you to stay on stage, Meta. Meta, please don't go. As we close, I want us to take a quick photo. Evelyn, would you mind joining us? And the reason a photo like this is important is to show you that women are doing things and women are leaders in their own sector. Maybe we could move forward. And just as we do that, Meta has been talking about the work that we're doing. Please join. If you want to know more, this QR code is on your screen. It'll stay on your screen long after we're done with taking the photo. It takes you to the work that we're doing at the center and our Africa strategy that we are embarking on. So let's maybe have a little bit of music, right, as we take the photo and do that. All right. Thank you, everybody. We really appreciate your time here today. Please take a look at our strategy. We know many of you here are partners, donors, and work with us. That QR code takes you straight there. Again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time today. Have a good morning and have a great day ahead.